There are nights in Seattle when the rain falls, as if the city remembers someone it once loved. This story begins with a door closing and ends with another opening between two people who once loved each other, lost each other, and then found themselves again in the sound of the rain. This is not merely a love story. It is the journey of two souls through betrayal, loneliness, and forgiveness, learning how to love again more accurately. It was raining in Seattle tonight. The kind of rain the city knew well, not heavy, not bitterly cold, just falling quietly like a whisper, enough for the streetlights to blur through the window into soft streaks of gold. Emma Carter set a small pot on the stove. The gentle simmering sound filled the kitchen, carrying the scent of chicken, soup, and herbs. She had always loved that smell, the smell of home. The oak dining table was already set, covered with a pale grey tablecloth and a small vase of lavender at the center. Candles flickered softly, their golden light dancing on the rim of the glasses. Emma looked around, adjusting the chair across from her, the one her husband, Daniel Moore, always sat in. He would be home soon, like every evening. From the porch came the sound of an engine. Emma glanced through the window, watching the headlights pierce through the rain. She smiled, a reflex born of habit. Whenever he came home, she felt a strange peace, as if the world were still intact. But tonight, something was different. The door opened. Daniel stepped inside, rain dripping from his black coat, his shoulders damp. His face looked tired, his eyes avoided hers. Emma set the spoon down, her voice soft. "You're home. I just warmed up the soup. It's still hot." Daniel stood there for a moment, silent. He took off his coat, hung it up, and wiped his hands. "Emma, we need to talk." His voice was low, rough, and trembling slightly. She turned to look at him closely, then nodded gently. "All right, but eat first, then we'll talk." He started to speak, but her gaze stopped him. They sat down, and dinner began in silence, the clink of spoons against plates, the rain against the windows, Daniel's uneven sighs. Emma poured wine into 2 glasses and placed one before him. "Drink. You look tired." Daniel held the glass but didn't take a sip. "Emma, I don't know how to say this right." She lifted her head. The candlelight touched her face, calm, tender. "Say it, Daniel." It took a deep breath. "Veronica, she's going through a hard time." Emma tilted her head slightly. "Veronica Hayes?" "Yeah. She just got divorced again. Things aren't good. She's been calling me these past few weeks. I can't just leave her like that." A silence stretched, endless. Emma set her glass down, her hand brushing the table's edge, her tone even. "And how do you plan to help her?" "I'll move in with her for a while. Just until she gets better." The candle flickered. Emma looked into her husband's eyes. In that instant, she saw it clearly. There was no longer us, only you and her. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "What about me?" Daniel lowered his head. "I'm sorry. I know this is wild, but I have to do it. I can't watch her fall apart." Emma nodded slowly. "I understand. You've always wanted to save people." He looked up, surprised she wasn't crying or angry. She rose and walked to the closet, pulling out a suitcase. "Give me 5 minutes." "What are you doing?" "Helping you pack." Her tone was almost too quiet. It made his chest tighten. While Daniel stood frozen, Emma moved around the room folding clothes, grabbing his charger, laptop, and the bottle of pills he often forgot. She did it all like someone preparing for a business trip, not a farewell. The warm light wrapped around her like mist, and Daniel wondered if he was dreaming. "You don't have to do this," he murmured. "Yes, I do." Her voice was barely a breath. "If you decide to go, let me help you leave properly." The sound cracked through the air like a quiet cut when she zipped the suitcase. Emma stopped by the door and turned to him. "It's colder in Portland. Don't forget your thick sweaters." Daniel couldn't speak. He felt small and meaningless before this woman. They cleaned up the table in silence, as if nothing had happened. Then Emma grabbed her coat and keys. "I'll drive you." "No, you don't have to." "No, I will." Her voice wasn't loud, but firm. Daniel didn't argue. He knew when Emma spoke like that, her mind was made up. The rain grew heavier on the road. Water from the trees streamed down the windshield like tears. Neither spoke. Streetlights shimmered across their faces, two people who had once been everything to each other, now strangers sharing the same space. Daniel opened his mouth to say something, but Emma spoke first. "Do you remember our first drive together? When I first moved to Seattle, it was raining just like this. You kept worrying I'd get cold." He pressed his lips together. "I remember. Back then, I thought, maybe I'd found the safest place in the world." She paused, smiled faintly. "Turns out, there's no such place forever, is there?" The air thickened. Daniel couldn't answer. The car stopped in front of a small house on the outskirts of Portland. Veronica's home. Lights glowed from inside, white shutters, and an old trellis. Emma turned off the engine, opened the trunk, and placed his suitcase by the curb. Daniel looked at her, his voice breaking. You don't hate me?" "No." She met his eyes. "I don't hate someone who's about to destroy himself." She opened her purse, pulled out a sealed cream envelope, and walked to Veronica's mailbox, slipping it inside. When she came back, Daniel asked, "What was that?" "A small gift. I think she'll need it." Her smile was gentle, almost frighteningly so. "Take care, Daniel. She deserves everything. You have to give." Emma got into the car and started the engine. The headlights washed over Daniel's face, tracing a raindrop on his cheek. She looked at him one last time, then drove into the night. Behind her, the man stood motionless in the rain beside his suitcase, while the light from Veronica's house glowed like the gates of hell opening. That night, Emma drove 150 miles back to Gig Harbor. The rain kept falling, steady as a heartbeat. On the radio, an old jazz song played, the singer's voice husky. "It's over, my darling." She didn't cry. Couldn't. She only felt hollow, as if someone had carved out a piece of her heart, leaving behind a terrifying silence. The coastal road was dark, the only light from the distant boats shimmering over the water. Emma rolled down the window. The cold wind brushed her face, the scent of salt mixing with rain. She stopped in front of a small wooden house, where her mother, Margaret, had lived for 20 years. The porch light was on, as if she'd known her daughter was coming home. The door opened. Margaret stood there, wrapped in a robe, her eyes warm as the candlelight. "Emma." Without a word, Emma stepped forward and held her tightly. Everything broke in a single breath. Her tears soaked into her mother's shoulder, salty as the sea. "I'm home, Mom. I know. I always know when you need to come back." They sat by the fire, steaming cups of tea between them. Emma told her everything, leaving nothing out. When she mentioned the envelope in the mailbox, Margaret only raised an eyebrow, saying nothing. "What was in it?" she asked softly. Emma gazed at the flames. The truth, everything he'd hidden for years, the accounts, the bad investments. "I kept it, not to hurt him, but to protect myself." Margaret nodded, her eyes deep with understanding. "You didn't destroy him. You just made him face himself." Emma smiled faintly. "Exactly. I don't need to push him down. I need to step aside." Outside, the rain kept falling. Margaret took her daughter's hand. "You know, the scariest part isn't being betrayed. It's still having enough love left to hurt." Emma said nothing. A tear fell, the last one. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the window. Waves lapped softly against the shore. The sky was tinted pink. Emma stood on the balcony, staring into the distance. Below, the lavender garden bloomed purple across the yard. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. There was still an emptiness inside her, but it was quiet now, not painful. In Portland, a few hours away, Daniel Moore stood before Veronica's door, suitcase dripping. The door opened. Veronica appeared, her hair tied back, a half smile on her lips. "Oh, you actually came. I didn't think you'd dare." Daniel managed only one sentence. "I thought I could help you." "Yeah, I thought so too." She tilted her head, her blue eyes glinting like glass. "Come in." Inside, the house smelled faintly of expensive perfume and old wine. Veronica handed him a glass. "We have a lot to talk about." Daniel stepped in, not knowing that at that very moment, the envelope waiting in the mailbox outside, holding everything that could ruin him, was about to be opened. The rain in Portland hadn't stopped. That night, Veronica Hayes stood on her porch in a thin robe with a glass of red wine. The warm light from the living room glowed behind her, yet her eyes held only darkness. A gust of wind stirred the small iron mailbox at the end of the path. It rattled faintly. She frowned. The lid was slightly open, something was inside. Setting her glass down, she stepped into the rain, her heels tapping softly on the wet ground. Inside the mailbox lay a cream-colored envelope, unmarked except for a short line. For Veronica Hayes. The paper was slightly damp, but the seal was intact. She looked around, no one was there. Daniel was in the shower, a dim light spilled under the bathroom door. Veronica picked up the envelope, studied it briefly, then carefully tore the edge open. Inside was a thick stack of documents, bank statements, account records, investment contracts, and scanned files, proving Daniel had used his company's name to conceal personal losses. Every page bore his signature. Veronica gave a short laugh, not one of amusement, but sharp, metallic. "Well, Emma Carter, you're not as simple as you look." She sank onto the sofa, leafing through the papers under the lamp. Each number glinted like a golden needle, stitching possibilities and power into her mind. Veronica had always known how to spot an opportunity. She saw it instantly. This wasn't just evidence. It was a chain one she could use to bind Daniel forever. She dialed a number. "Jaime, it's me. Are you free?" A low, steady male voice answered. "Always for you. What's going on? Come over. I just got a little gift from our guardian angel." What did she send? A blessing and all of Daniel's secrets. She laughed, her voice slicing through the rainy night. Daniel was stepping out of the shower, towel around his shoulders. Seeing Veronica reading something, he asked, "What are you looking at?" "Oh, nothing. Just something I happened to find. You seem pleased. Maybe because you're home." She closed the folder and slid it beneath the sofa cushion. Smiling, everything had begun. Daniel tried to readjust to the old house, the place that once had been theirs. Every corner brought back memories, yet none of them offered comfort. The house felt staged, too deliberate. A framed photo of young Veronica, a half-burned candle, a bottle of expensive wine, all like props on a set. He stepped closer, speaking softly. "Thank you for letting me come back." "Don't thank me," she replied lightly. "Just be here when I need you." It sounded tender, but beneath it lay command. Daniel didn't notice. He thought he was doing the right thing, saving someone. But in Veronica's eyes, he was merely a pawn walking willingly onto the board. By the time Jaime Sanders arrived, dawn was near. He wore a long coat, leather gloves, a hint of cedarwood cologne, the kind of quiet confidence from experience. Veronica opened the door. Their gaze met like long-time conspirators. "She really sent it?" Jaime asked. "I think so. And poor Daniel has no idea." Jaime flipped through a few pages, frowning. "You realize what you're holding? This could destroy him." "I know, and I intend to use it well." She poured 2 glasses of wine. "She's smart, Jaime. Set the trap without touching a thing. All I had to do was pick it up." They clinked glasses lightly. From down the hall, Daniel slept soundly in the old bedroom. Meanwhile, morning was breaking over Gig Harbor, over 100 miles away. Emma Carter woke to the soft patter of rain. The house was peaceful, filled with the smell of fresh bread and coffee. She walked barefoot into the kitchen. The morning light brushed her hair with gold. Margaret was already up, glasses perched on her nose, her face calm and kind. "Sleep well?" she asked. "Well enough. The rain reminds me of Seattle. You'll get used to it. Gig Harbor is quiet, slower, softer, and has fewer people who need saving." Emma smiled faintly. "You always know what to say, Mom." Margaret poured more coffee, studying her daughter. "You don't have to explain. I know. Men like Daniel, life will teach them in its own way." Emma looked out the window toward the glimmering bay. "I don't want him to suffer, Mom. I want him to understand." Margaret placed a hand on hers. "Sometimes, only losing everything can teach someone what truly matters." They sat in silence, the sound of waves, the whisper of rain. Emma exhaled, her eyes distant. "Mom, I don't hate him, honestly. I feel sad that love turned out to be so fragile." Her mother smiled gently. "That's why you're different, Emma. You know how to love without owning." And that is freedom. The words tightened her throat. She stepped outside, the cold air brushing her skin, and her heart finally quieted. The clouds began to thin, morning light spilling softly across the bay. She thought of Daniel no longer with anger, only a faint tenderness. That feeling, strangely enough, still existed, but it had changed color. No longer burning red, but a warm shade of ash. Emma closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Thank you for leaving. Otherwise, I'd never have found myself again." 3 days later, in Portland, Daniel began to sense an unease he couldn't name. Veronica kept taking secret calls, stepping onto the balcony, lowering her voice. When he asked, she'd smile. Just business. The house, once cold, now felt hollow. In the mornings, he cooked breakfast she didn't eat. At night, when he spoke, she barely responded. Daniel told himself she just needed time, that she was still healing. But every night, he heard laughter from the next room, the clinking of glasses. One evening, he opened the door and saw Veronica video chatting with Jamie Sanders. They were laughing, eyes locked for too long. When Daniel entered, she closed the laptop too quickly. "Who was that?" he asked. "Oh, just an old business partner. Don't be so curious, Daniel." He nodded, but something twisted inside him. That night, he lay awake, listening to the rain drumming coldly on the roof. Emma's words echoed in his mind. "I don't hate someone who's about to destroy himself." He hadn't understood then. Now he did. He was destroying himself piece by piece in this house. In Gig Harbor, Emma's days began anew. She helped her mother in the garden and redesigned the small cottage by the bay into a studio. Drawings spread across her desk, sunlight filtered in, carrying the scent of pine wood. She uploaded her old portfolio and took on small design projects from Seattle clients. Life was starting again slowly, steadily. In the evenings, she and her mother walked along the bay with warm coffee, talking like friends. Once, Margaret asked, "If he came back, what would you do?" Emma smiled, watching the water shimmer under the sunset. "I don't know. Maybe I'd listen. But I wouldn't promise anything." "That's enough." Her mother nodded. "Forgiveness isn't opening the door. It's setting down the key." Emma nodded, feeling lighter. She knew she was finally healing. That night in Portland, Veronica reopened the envelope. She and Jaime sat facing each other, the documents spread before them. "We can use this to keep him under control," Jaime said evenly. "No threats, just a hint that you have it." "I know," Veronica replied, smiling. "Daniel's terrified of losing his reputation. He'll do anything to keep quiet, even lose everything," Jaime added. Emma knew that. Yes. Veronica inhaled slowly. Maybe she wanted him to feel exactly what she once did. They exchanged a look and then laughed. But beneath that laughter was something chilling, the sound of people too familiar with the dark. Behind the half-closed door, Daniel heard it all. He stood frozen. Veronica's voice rang out, sweet but sharp as glass. "He thinks he came here to save me. No. He just signed his own sentence." Daniel stepped back, heart pounding. He no longer recognized the voice of the woman he once loved. The house shrank around him, cold and airless. He stumbled outside into the rain. The icy drops struck his face, but all he felt was emptiness. Emma's words echoed again in his mind. "One day, you'll understand. An apology can't undo some mistakes." He looked up at the Portland sky. The rain thickened, streetlights bleeding into the night. And in that moment, he understood. His reckoning had just begun. That morning in Portland was shrouded in fog. Veronica's house sat on a small hill overlooking the Willamette River, where the wind cut cold through the bare trees. Daniel woke early, just as he always had in Seattle. He made coffee, prepared breakfast, and waited for Veronica downstairs. But she never appeared. The clock read 8. On the table, a wine glass still bore her lipstick from the night before. Beside it lay a note scribbled in haste. "Love, I'm meeting a client. Don't wait." Daniel read the words, a sharp ache pressing against his chest. He told himself it was nothing, she was simply busy with work. Yet unease lingered. He sat on the sofa, phone in hand, scrolling through his inbox. A notification appeared from his old company in Seattle. Daniel, we've received your resignation. Thank you for your years of service. He froze. He hadn't sent any resignation. A chill ran down his spine. Before he could call to clarify, the door opened. Veronica stepped in, radiant, wrapped in a long coat. "You're up early," she smiled, kissing his cheek. "I have good news." "What kind?" "Jamie's joining me on a new investment project. I need you to handle the legal side." Daniel frowned. "Jamie? He's in finance, not real estate." "Exactly," she said brightly. "That's what makes him perfect. He's brilliant, visionary. I trust him." Daniel said nothing. He'd never seen her this animated, eyes bright, voice quick, movements almost too smooth. But beneath the charm, something felt off too rehearsed. That evening, they had dinner together. Jaime joined them. He dressed and carried himself quietly, his tone confident and fluid. Each time he laughed, his eyes lingered on Veronica more than Daniel. "I heard you used to head tech projects in Seattle," Jamie asked. "That's right. Impressive. I like people who can build something from nothing." Veronica placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder, her voice soft. "He's always been that way, just sometimes too trusting." The table laughed. Only Daniel felt the emptiness behind it. In the following days, he became entangled in their new project. Veronica handed him contracts and proposals to review. All seemed legitimate, yet curiously, every document listed only her and Jaime as partners. Daniel's name appeared once, as a consultant. "Why don't you put me as a co-signer?" he asked. "No need, love. I want you to relax and not worry about paperwork." But that was precisely what made him uneasy. One night, he opened his laptop and checked old records. He found a significant transfer from his Seattle account in the investments folder. The same account, only he and Emma knew the password to. His breath caught. She wouldn't have done this. Then who? The next morning, he asked, "Did anyone access my account?" "What account?" She replied calmly. "The one in Seattle. There was a strange transaction." She raised an eyebrow, setting down her cup. "Do you really think I have time to hack you, Daniel?" He said nothing. She smiled faintly. "But what if I did?" Her tone sent a shiver through him. She moved closer, brushing his cheek with her fingers. "You worry too much. Trust me, everything's fine." Then she turned away, leaving only the faint trace of perfume and the sound of the wind hissing through the window. Across the water, life in Gig Harbor moved at another pace. Emma had taken on her first clients, a young couple wanting to redesign their lakeside apartment. They met in her small studio, the afternoon light pooling gold across her sketches. "We heard you used to work at Seattle Design House," the husband asked. "Yes. I left to start over here." Emma smiled. The wife said softly, "I like how you say start over. It sounds hopeful." "Because it is," Emma replied. "Sometimes you must lose everything to know what you truly need." The couple exchanged a quiet smile, and Emma, for a moment, thought of Daniel, his eyes across the dinner table that last night. There was no bitterness left, only distance. She sent off her designs, then walked to the bay. The water was calm under a dim sky. She checked her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly, and then saw his name. "Daniel Moore resigns as Project Director of Eastbridge Technologies." She stared at the headline, unsure whether to smile or sigh. Finally, she whispered, "It's begun, Daniel. The web you've stepped into has no way out." Daniel soon realized the house wasn't just a home but a trap. Veronica structured everything to keep him dependent. Shared bank cards, shared phones, every bill under her name. Whenever he asked, she'd laugh. "Relax, love. We're one, aren't we?" But he felt himself slipping away piece by piece. Jaime appeared almost daily. They'd discuss business, often behind closed doors. Daniel would hear laughter, the clink of glasses. He started drinking too to forget. But each morning, the hangover hit harder, like guilt pressing on his skull. One night, he overheard Veronica on the phone, her voice smooth as silk. "Yes, move the rest to Jaime's account." "Yes," Daniels agreed. A pause. "Don't worry, he won't check. I know how to keep him from asking." Daniel stepped out from the shadows, his silhouette framed in the doorway. "Who are you talking to?" She turned, face serene. "Work. You're exhausting me with this jealousy, Daniel." He advanced a step, his voice tight. "What are you hiding from me?" She was silent for a beat, then smiled. "Hiding? No, love. Protecting you." She placed a hand on his chest, whispering, "If you knew everything, you wouldn't survive it." He gripped her wrist, his voice breaking. "Don't talk to me like I'm a child." She looked at him, expression soft but cutting. "Not a child, Daniel. A target." Then she pulled away, walking upstairs, leaving him frozen in the dark. In the days that followed, Daniel stopped sleeping. He searched the house, desperate for what she kept from him. But each time he tried, she seemed already aware. Once, he caught her locking the safe in the living room. She turned, unapologetic. "Is this what you're looking for?" She set a thick folder on the table, the same documents Emma had sent. Daniel stared. How did you get those?" "Oh, a clever woman sent them to me." "Emma?" "Yes. She's pretty charming. Told me to keep them safe. I intend to." She sat, her voice low but sharp. "Now you understand. I hold your past, your present, and if you're not careful, your future too." Daniel trembled. Veronica gathered the papers, locked them back in the safe, and said quietly, "You'll stay here. Do what I say. And don't think of leaving. Out there, no one's waiting for you anymore." Back in Gig Harbor, the rain returned. Emma was sketching when her mother entered, carrying a cup of tea. "Thinking about the past again?" Margaret asked. "No," Emma smiled faintly. "I feel sorry." "For whom?" "For him." Daniel. He thought he was saving someone, but really, he was losing himself. Margaret sat beside her, studying the sketch, a small cabin in the pines by the sea. "It's lovely," she said, "but something's missing." "What is it?" "Light. No matter how beautiful a house is, it needs a window that lets the light in. People do too." Emma looked up, her eyes soft and melancholy. "I'll add one." "Thank you, Mum." She picked up her pencil and drew a small window to the left, a warm beam spilling into the empty room. That night, Daniel stayed awake. The house was too quiet. He stepped outside. Mist and rain blurred the streetlights. He remembered that night in Seattle, the last dinner. Emma's voice saying, "Remember your sweaters. It's colder in Portland." Now he understood it hadn't been worry, but a farewell. He sat on the porch, head bowed. The rain tapped steadily against the steps. He realized he was truly lost, surrounded by people sharper, colder, and far beyond his control. Somewhere miles away, in the calm of a seaside house, the woman he'd left behind slept peacefully, her storm long over. And he, the man who once believed he could save everyone, was still trapped, thrashing inside the web of his own making. The morning in Portland was cold and wrapped in fog. Daniel woke to the sound of clinking glasses from the living room. Laughter followed, Veronica's and Jaime's voices weaving together, soft and intimate, with a note of mockery hidden between the lines. He pulled on a sweater and walked out. The pale light from the room washed over their faces, that cold, white light that made everything look unfamiliar. Veronica sat in her silk robe, hair tied up, with a glass of red wine. Jaime lounged on the sofa, his smile lazy, detached. "Good morning, Daniel," Veronica said without turning. "Did you sleep well?" "I thought," he hesitated. "I thought you said he wasn't coming today." Jaime smirked. "The world spins fast, my friend." Something came up. Daniel said nothing. He went to the kitchen and poured himself coffee. The steam rose warm, but his chest stayed cold. He no longer recognized the woman before him. There was something hollow in her eyes, the very thing he'd once loved most about her, now gone. Veronica's tone was honey smooth. "I need you to sign a few papers. Just some formalities, nothing major." "What kind of papers?" "Investments. Jaime and I are starting a new company. You'd be a guarantor." She slid the folder across the table. His name was already there next to a forged signature. He turned each page slowly, then looked up. "This isn't a guarantor agreement. It's a transfer of assets." Veronica kept smiling, but her lips trembled slightly. "Don't make it dramatic, Daniel. I need a little trust." "Trust isn't signing blind." Jaime stepped in, voice smooth. "You're living off her, aren't you? She feeds you, shelters you. Signing one paper as thanks, what's the harm?" Daniel clenched his fists. I don't owe anyone enough to sell my soul. Veronica set her glass down. The smile vanished. Don't speak in grand words, Daniel. You don't have a soul left to sell. The sentence dropped like a blade. The room fell silent but for the ticking clock. Daniel stood between them, realizing he was nothing more than an extra in his life. He turned away and walked upstairs. When the door shut behind him, Veronica exhaled and smirked. See, she murmured to Jamie. He's scared now. He's on the edge, Jamie replied quietly. One more push will do. Meanwhile, rare February sunlight streamed through the small studio windows in Gig Harbor. Emma was choosing fabrics for a new project when the phone rang. A familiar voice came through. Emma Carter? This is Laura, creative director at Eastbridge, Seattle. Do you remember me? Emma smiled. Of course, Laura. It's been a while. I saw your new portfolio. Beautiful work. We're opening a new downtown building and need a designer. You'd be perfect. Emma blinked in surprise. You're not worried about me leaving the company? On the contrary, the ones who leave are usually the ones brave enough to create. I want to meet you. When the call ended, Emma stood still. Seattle. The city where everything had begun and broken. But now it was calling her back not as someone's wife, but as her own woman. She looked out toward the bay. The wind lifted strands of her hair. Her mother stepped onto the porch with a cup of tea. Good news? Margaret asked. Yes. Emma smiled softly. Seattle's calling me home. Margaret nodded. You're ready. Not to find someone, but to find yourself again. Emma said nothing, but inside, a quiet light began to bloom. In Portland, night fell. Daniel sat alone, the desk lamp reflecting off the mirror. His face was pale, hollowed. He opened his laptop and checked his bank account. The balance had dropped large transfers he hadn't made. He went downstairs. Veronica was reading a magazine, legs crossed, posture relaxed. You took my money? He asked. I only moved it temporarily. You don't need that much anyway. You had no right. Right? She scoffed. You gave me everything the day you walked into this house. Daniel's voice hardened. I'm not your puppet. No, she said, tilting her head. But you act like one. I only pull the strings. He wanted to yell, to smash something, but it all felt pointless. She stood and came close, her voice low. Don't disappoint me, Daniel. You know what I keep in that safe. He stared at her at the flawless face, the beautiful eyes, and the empty soul behind them. You don't love anyone, do you? Veronica smiled faintly. Wrong. I love control. Then she turned away, leaving him alone in the echo of lies he'd helped build. Daniel didn't leave. He couldn't. Whenever he thought about running, he saw her smiling with Jamie and remembered the envelope that could destroy him. He was trapped in the house, in his guilt, in fear. Days passed. Veronica grew colder, sharper. She only spoke when she needed something. Jaime began staying over. Daniel heard their laughter, their music in the very room that used to be his. Once, he came downstairs at midnight and saw them dancing under the soft yellow light. Veronica looked over her shoulder. You're awake? He froze. Jaime chuckled. Hey, old friend. Want to join? No one answered. Veronica's voice was calm, almost sweet. If this bothers you, you can leave. But remember one email from me, and your secrets will reach your company and the court. Daniel stepped back, heart pounding. He realized he no longer had freedom or dignity. He was a prisoner in the house of lies. In Gig Harbor, Emma was packing. She glanced around the small room where she had relearned how to breathe, smile, and stand again. Margaret helped fold her clothes. Are you afraid? She asked. Of what? Of facing your old ghosts. That city still holds them. Emma smiled softly. Ghosts only haunt when you keep running. I'm not running anymore. Her mother nodded. Good. You've learned what many never do. Forgiveness frees you, not them. Emma hugged her, whispering, Thank you, Mom. I'm going back. Not to rebuild the past, but to begin again. As Emma left Gig Harbor, a soft rain began to fall. She drove along the wet roads, across the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, wind howling, the gray sea beneath. The feeling was the same as when she left Seattle, except this time, she wasn't escaping. She was returning. Back in Portland, On a night of relentless rain, Daniel noticed Jamie's suitcase by the stairs. His shoes were lined up neatly next to Daniel's own. He stared at them in silence. Veronica walked over, her voice syrup-sweet. "Don't be upset. Jamie's staying for a while. He's helping us. Helping humiliate me, you mean? Don't say that." She brushed his shoulder lightly. "You said you loved my strength once. Well, this is what strength looks like." Daniel looked around the house, once warm, now hollow. The photos, the decor, all of it felt staged. He stepped outside. Rain lashed against him, cold and relentless. Inside, Veronica and Jaime laughed. Glasses clinked. Jazz played low and slow. Daniel closed his eyes. In the storm's whisper, he heard Emma's voice. "Don't forget, Daniel. I don't hate you. I just let go." He opened his eyes. The rain blurred the world before him. For the first time, he felt more pitiful than guilty. And as the wind howled through the porch, Daniel whispered into the dark, "Is anyone left who still believes I can be good again?" It rained all day in Portland. The thick, March kind of rain, part mist, part smoke, fell soundlessly, draping the city in a dull grey shroud. Daniel Moore sat in his car, staring through the wet glass. He no longer knew how long he'd been there. The coffee in his hand had gone cold, and the radio murmured static. He had nowhere left to go, and no reason left to stay. Jamie Sanders had all but moved into Veronica's house for the past week. The two acted as if Daniel were invisible, talking openly, discussing deals, dining together. Sometimes Veronica placed a hand on Jamie's shoulder and laughed, that same laugh Daniel once thought belonged only to him. He couldn't bear it anymore. Tonight, he would leave. He didn't know where he would go, even if it meant sleeping in his car. He needed to escape that house, a place that once held love, now built only of lies. He turned off the engine and stepped inside. The house was dark, save for the soft hum of jazz spilling from the living room. Daniel hung up his coat and moved toward the light. Veronica sat on the sofa, her hair loose and her silk dress clinging to her body. Jaime stood behind her, one hand resting casually on her shoulder, his lazy smile unfazed. They stopped talking when they saw him. "You're home early," Veronica said, her tone even. "I thought you'd be out all night." "I came to get my things," Daniel replied, voice rough. "I'm leaving." She tilted her head, lips curling. "Leaving for where? Who would take you in?" "Emma? She's long forgotten you." He didn't answer. He just looked at her long and steady. "You once said you needed saving, Veronica. I believed you. Turns out, I was just a tool." Jaime chuckled under his breath. "A tool, huh? Not a bad kind, one that brews coffee, fixes wiring, and signs papers too." Daniel turned to him. "What do you want, Jaime?" "Me? I want what you used to have, a place beside her, but that seat's mine now." Veronica rose, stepping closer. Her eyes shimmered, bright and icy. "You're right, Daniel. I needed saving, but not from the world, from you." She walked past him to the table, picked up a folder, and turned back. "I just signed the deal to transfer all our shared assets. Everything in your name is mine now. And guess what?" She smirked. "Your signature's already on it." Daniel froze. "What? Remember those guarantor papers? That's what they were. You've already signed." Color drained from his face. He stepped back, shaking his head. "You tricked me." "No, you tricked yourself," she said softly. "You trusted too easily." She handed the folder to Jamie. "He's done. Finish the rest." Jaime nodded, smiling faintly. He walked up to Daniel and clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Thanks for the help, old friend. You have no idea how much you've just made me." Daniel shoved his hand away, voice breaking. "You two planned this from the start?" Veronica met his eyes without blinking. "From the moment I got that envelope from your wife." "Emma knew?" "Of course." She smiled thinly. "She sent me all the documents. She wanted you to fall on your own, Daniel. I just opened the pit." Daniel sank into the chair. The air thickened, every sound swallowed by the rain hammering the roof. Veronica leaned down, her voice a whisper. "Isn't it funny? That gentle wife of yours, she knew exactly how to destroy you. Cleanly, effortlessly." He stared into the void. He wanted to rage, scream, shatter everything but couldn't, because deep down, he knew she was right. Emma hadn't sought revenge. She had stepped aside, and his weakness had done the rest. He rose, unsteady, and walked toward the door. Veronica called after him, her voice light as air. "Don't go too far, Daniel. You're still useful." The door shut. Rain poured down like a flood. Daniel stepped into the dark, not knowing where his feet would take him. That night, Portland was bitterly cold. He wandered through empty streets, past old riverside warehouses, and over iron bridges. Neon lights shimmered on the wet pavement, his reflection warped beneath them. He stopped by the riverbank, staring into the black water. The wind howled. The rain fell harder. He didn't mean to jump, but the thought came. A way out. Then Emma's voice echoed in his mind. "I don't hate someone who's about to destroy himself." He laughed, a raw, broken sound swallowed by the rain. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from his old company. "We're reviewing financial misconduct allegations in your name. Please cooperate." His hands trembled. Veronica had done it. She'd sent the files. He was finished completely. The next morning, he returned to the house. No one was there. The living room was stripped bare. The safe hung open. On the table, a note. "Don't look for us. Jamie and I are gone. Don't call. Oh, and don't forget to pay the taxes." He sank to the floor. The empty rooms echoed with the steady, frozen rhythm of rain against the glass. He went to the kitchen, nothing left but an empty wine bottle. The world blurred around him. A photo of Veronica slipped off the wall and shattered. He picked it up. The glass cut his palm. Blood mixed with the rain on the floor. He didn't feel pain, only the vast, hollow quiet inside. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Emma stepped into Eastbridge's new headquarters. The air smelled of paint and fresh wood. Light filled every corner. Laura greeted her with a warm smile. "I'm so glad you said yes," Laura said. "This project will redefine who we are." Emma looked around. Everything gleamed. Nothing like the dim rooms she'd once lived in. "Thank you," she said. "I think I'm ready for change, too." Laura nodded. "You know, I've always believed women create best after heartbreak. They rebuild everything, even themselves." Emma smiled faintly. Maybe that's true. That afternoon, she stood by the window on the 18th floor, watching the city below. Seattle's rain fell softly, just like the day she left. But now, it wasn't sorrowful. It was alive, a heartbeat. She took out her phone and scrolled to an old contact, Daniel Moore. She hadn't deleted it, but she'd never opened it either. Her thumb hovered for a second, then locked the screen. No words needed. He'd already received every answer in her silence. 3 days later, the police knocked on Daniel's door. They brought a warrant for a financial investigation. He wasn't arrested, but they took his records. His lawyer spoke quietly. "They have copies of the contracts." "With your signature?" Daniel nodded. His voice was hoarse. "I know." When they left, he sat alone, staring at the barren walls. No Veronica, no Jamie, nothing. Only the ticking of the clock and the whisper of the rain. He stood and opened the window. The chill air swept in. Rain struck his hands like needles. And yet, something inside him grew still, as if, at last, he'd reached the bottom, where nothing was left to lose. In that deepest quiet, sometimes a man begins to hear himself. He whispered, unsure to whom, "Emma, I understand now." Then he smiled, faint but real. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing away every trace of deceit, pride, and self-delusion. And somewhere in that cold, drenched city, a man who had lost everything was beginning slowly, painfully to relearn the simplest thing of all, how to stand again. The rain had stopped in Portland, but the city still glistened as if it had just survived a long ache. Daniel Moore sat by the window of a temporary apartment, the one the police had allowed him to stay in during the investigation. The room was nearly bare, a wooden chair, a thin mattress, and a cold cup of coffee. Morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, carving tired lines across his face. Since the day Veronica disappeared with Jamie, everything had collapsed faster than he could breathe. His old company in Seattle had issued a statement. "Daniel Moore has been suspended from all representative duties." Friends quietly deleted his name from their contacts. Former colleagues sent polite messages, cautious, distant, like people paying respects to someone already dead. He didn't blame them. He understood. The world has no room for those who were once admired and then fell. Daniel tried calling Veronica, but her number was blocked. Jaime was gone too. What remained of him was a tainted name scattered across the headlines. Project Director Daniel Moore under investigation for financial misconduct. Every time he read it, something in his chest twisted not from guilt, but from the humiliation of a man who once believed himself decent. That afternoon, he went outside. The air was cool, damp, and smelled faintly of rotting wood. He walked along the Willamette River, over rusted bridges. Now and then, people recognized him. Some whispered, "That's him." Some smirked. Some turned away. Daniel slowed, eyes on the dark water. He thought of Emma. He missed her so deeply that whenever he saw the glow of a kitchen light through a window, he imagined her there standing quietly in their old home in Seattle, smiling. But even that memory hurts now. At night, he returned to the apartment. His name flooded social media, online news clips, comments, speculations. Everyone had something to say about him, though none knew. One anonymous post read, "Men like Daniel Moore are hollow, polite on the surface, weak underneath, easy prey for the women who control them." He read it all, didn't react, didn't get angry, because, more than anyone, he knew they were right. He had let himself be led, not by love, but fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten, fear of not mattering anymore. He thought of Emma, of her voice when she'd said, "Take care." Back then, he'd thought it was a goodbye. Now he knew it was a warning. A few days later, he got into his car and drove north. No plans, no destination, just motion. Through mist-covered mountains, through small towns tucked between pine forests. By nightfall, he stopped at an old gas station. The attendant, an older man, squinted at him. "Where are you headed at this hour, son?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I was hoping you could tell me." The man studied him, then said, "People only run when they can't stand themselves anymore. But no one runs forever. Sooner or later, you turn around and face it." Daniel nodded. "Thanks." The words clung to him the whole way. And before he realized it, he had returned to Seattle. It was raining again, the same soft drizzle he'd once loved, the kind that always made him think of Emma first. He drove through familiar streets, over the Fremont Bridge, past the old cafe where they used to meet. Everything looked the same, only he was different. He stopped the car outside his old house. Warm yellow light glowed through the windows. A woman was watering the flowers on the porch, her figure small, hair tied up. Emma, his heart clenched. From a distance, he watched her, still graceful, her shoulders slender but steady. Beside her was a man, maybe a neighbor, helping her fix the garden hose. They spoke, smiled, not intimate, but kind. It was such an ordinary scene, yet to Daniel, it cut deep. The woman who had once been his home, his breath, his everything, now was simply a stranger beneath the porch light, peaceful in a world that no longer needed him. He sat there, silent in the car. Rain streamed down the windshield, blurring everything, as if the city were weeping for him. He whispered, "You look happy, Emma. Thank you for not breaking." When the man left, Emma stepped inside, closing the door. The light glowed warmer, and Daniel, still in his cold, lonely car, finally began to cry. Not loudly, not desperately, just quiet tears that slipped into the rain and disappeared into the night of Seattle. The next day, he rented a small room in Ballard, near the docks. A bed, a stove, and a window overlooking the sea. The air smelled of salt, gulls cried in the morning, ships groaned at the harbor. He started looking for work. No one hired him. His resume was blocked, his reputation gone. Finally, he found a temporary job at a small auto shop, washing cars, cleaning floors, wiping glass. Every night he came home exhausted, smelling of oil and gasoline, but at least it was real. For months, he lived like a shadow. He ate little, slept little, spoke even less. Work was the only thing that made him forget who he used to be. While cleaning a silver SUV one afternoon, the radio played news about Eastbridge's new project. Interior designer Emma Carter has secured a major contract with East Bridge, Seattle. Her work is praised for its sensitivity and emotional depth. Daniel froze. Her name drifted through the speakers, soft, clear, like sunlight cutting through cloud. He smiled. No bitterness, no regret, just peace, because at least one of them had found their way, and he knew, in some small way, he had been part of what made her strong. Sometimes, he passed by the downtown tower Emma was designing. He never went inside, only stood across the street, catching glimpses of her through the glass. She looked different now, shorter hair, surer steps, a radiant smile. He thought he'd do everything differently if he could return a year. He'd stay at that dinner table a little longer. He'd let her talk. He wouldn't let her pack the suitcase alone. He wouldn't drive to Veronica's door. But the past isn't a place to fix, only a lesson to remember. One evening, as he was locking up the garage, a younger co-worker asked, "Who were you before this? You don't look like a guy who was born to wash cars." Daniel chuckled softly. "I used to think I was important, but really, I was just someone who needed to learn how to live." "And have you learned?" He gazed toward the sea, where the harbor lights shimmered on the dark waves. "Almost." That night, he drove back to his old neighborhood. Not to see Emma, to watch the light from afar. The light he once called home. On the seat beside him lay a small bundle of dried lavender, her favorite flower wrapped in brown paper. He didn't leave it at her door. He only held it, as if holding a wordless apology. He stayed there until midnight. Then the rain began again, soft, patient, forgiving. No longer the storm of endings, but the rain of healing. He whispered, "Thank you, Emma. Losing you was how I finally found myself." Then he started the car and drove away without looking back. Daniel Moore wasn't running from anything for the first time in years. He was moving forward. Outside, the city shimmered. The rain merged with the golden glow of streetlights, casting its reflection on his face, no longer that of a broken man, but of someone learning, at last, how to stand. Spring came late to Seattle. The trees along Lake Union were only beginning to bud, and the air still carried the damp chill of winter that refused to leave. Daniel Moore woke before dawn. He had lived in his small Ballard apartment for over 6 months. Each morning, he walked along the docks, watching the sunrise ripple across the water, breathing in the salty tang of the sea. He no longer looked like a man who had fallen apart. Still thin, yes, but there was life in his eyes again. Still quiet, but no longer hollow. The garage job had become routine. He worked steadily, spoke little, and always helped when asked. Slowly, the other mechanics grew fond of him. They called him Mr. Quiet. No one knew he had once been a director, lived in a big house, and had a wife named Emma. And he never told them. Because some pasts don't need to be hidden, but they don't need to be displayed either. In the evenings, Daniel often sat at a small cafe on the corner of Market Street. It had a window facing the hill where buses rumbled by in soft rhythm. He ordered a black Americano and read the newspaper alone. That afternoon, his old phone buzzed a message from the law firm. "Your case has been closed. You bear no further legal responsibility. We wish you peace." He set the phone down and drew in a deep breath. A year. A whole year to scrub clean what Veronica and Jamie had destroyed. A year paid in dignity, isolation, and the exhaustion of the soul. Now, finally, he was free. But freedom doesn't mean happiness. Outside, rain began to fall. Seattle rain, it always came unannounced, left without goodbye. He watched people hurry by with umbrellas, the sound of shoes striking the wet pavement like time tapping gently against memory. He thought of Emma, not with pain, but hunger, the hunger to speak with her again and see her smile again, not to ask forgiveness, only to say something true. That night, back in his room, he opened a wooden box. Inside were a few old things, their wedding photo, a few letters, the ring he'd removed the night he left Seattle. He touched the photo, 2 young faces, smiling in a lavender field. He whispered, "Emma, I never deserved your love, but if I could, I'd thank you not for forgiving me, but for teaching me how to stand." He put the box away, sat at the desk, and began to write. Not a love letter, but an honest one. Not to send, to free himself. "I used to think love meant holding on, but it turns out, love means letting someone be free enough to find their own happiness, even when that happiness isn't you. I used to fear loneliness. Now I know loneliness doesn't kill. Lies do. Thank you, Emma, for leaving before I destroyed us both. He folded the paper and set it on the table. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds thinned, and a faint silver line appeared on the horizon. A few days later, he took time off, rented a car, and drove north along the coastal road toward Bellingham. Music played an old jazz tune, slow and wistful. With every mile, his heart felt a little lighter. The city slipped away behind him. Only sea and sky remained. He stopped at a small cafe by the beach, bought a cup of coffee, and sat watching the waves. A young couple passed by, holding hands, laughing softly. He watched them and smiled. For the first time, he didn't feel envy. He only felt that it was beautiful. Inside him, the hunger that had tormented him, the hunger to be loved, to matter, to be seen, was slowly being replaced by something simpler: gratitude. That evening, he returned to Seattle. The city shimmered beneath a thin veil of rain. Streetlights glowed against the slick pavement like fallen stars. He stopped at a cafe near downtown, where he and Emma had their first date. It was still there, only the sign had changed. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and baked waffles, the music gentle and familiar. He ordered a latte and sat in the corner where they had once spoken about the future. He remembered that day clearly. She'd smiled, saying she wanted a small studio by the sea. He'd dreamed of starting his own company. They'd believed everything good could last forever. But life isn't a straight line. It's a circle. And now, he was back at the same place, a different man. Daniel took out a pen and a blank sheet of paper. He wasn't afraid anymore. This time, it was a real letter, one meant for Emma. Emma, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to send it. I'm not here to ask forgiveness. I only want to tell you were right. You once said, "You're unhappy because you don't know who you are." Now I do. I'm not Daniel, the director. I'm not Daniel, the betrayed. I'm just Daniel, someone learning how to live honestly again. He paused, watching raindrops glitter on the glass, then kept writing, "I don't hope to return. I don't want your pity. I only hope that if someday you see me on the street, you'll smile, because then you'll know you saved someone in the most beautiful way possible by walking away." He signed his name, folded the letter, and slipped it into an envelope. He wouldn't send it yet, maybe in a few days, weeks. But that letter was the door he needed to open to step out of the darkness within, finally. On the drive home, he passed by his old neighborhood. The lights in the windows glowed softly. Rain fell in gentle threads. He stopped the car, got out, and stood beneath the drizzle. No fear now, no bitterness, only peace. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Emma, I'm not here to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know I'm different now." A breeze carried the faint scent of lavender from the backyard. He smiled, turned away, and got back into the car. As he drove off, a figure appeared at the upstairs window. Emma stood still, watching the familiar car disappear into the rain. She didn't know why she'd come to the window at that exact moment, only that her heart had begun to beat faster. She touched the cold glass and whispered, softly, to no one but herself, "Welcome back, Daniel." Outside, Seattle kept raining, a warm, neither sorrowful nor fierce, just the kind that washes away the past and clears the way for what comes next. And Daniel Moore, driving through streets glimmering with light, felt weightless. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He only knew that his soul was no longer hungry. It was raining again in Seattle. The rain fell like strands of silver under the streetlights, tracing the city in soft, melancholy light. Daniel Moore stood before his old house, an umbrella in hand, his palm cold, though he did not tremble. He had been standing there for a long time. The house was unchanged, warm light through the windows, the lavender vines by the porch, the small wooden sign carved with the words "Carter's Home." He smiled faintly. That name was still there. She hadn't changed it. He remembered every detail: the smell of the wood, the creak of the stairs, the glow in the living room. Every corner held a memory. Only the man who once lived here was no longer the same. He tightened his grip on the envelope in his coat pocket, the letter he'd written weeks ago. Tonight, He wouldn't just slip it into the mailbox like she once had. Tonight, he would knock. The gate creaked softly. He walked up the steps, rain dripping from the roof, mist rising in the warm porch light. He knocked once, no answer. He knocked again. The door opened. Emma stood there, a cup of tea in her hand, her hair tied back, her face calm. In that instant, the world stopped. Time didn't rewind, it simply unfolded. Quietly, deeply. She wasn't surprised, nor angry. She just looked at him long enough for him to feel the weight of years in her eyes. He said softly, "Hello, Emma." "Hello, Daniel." Her voice was steady, warm, but it pierced him all the same. "Have you been standing in the rain long?" "A while. You should come in. You're soaked." She stepped aside. He entered. The house smelled of wood and cinnamon, warm and alive. Everything familiar yet changed, as though the house had kept living without him. On the shelf were new photos. Emma with her mother, some colleagues, and one from the opening of the East Bridge building. He smiled. "You did it." "More or less," she said. "And you?" He smiled sadly. "I'm still learning how to live, but I'm not the same man anymore." Emma nodded and sat on the sofa. "What would you like to drink?" "Just water. I don't want to intrude." "You wouldn't have come if you didn't want to intrude." Her tone was light, not unkind, but honest. Daniel exhaled, his hand trembling slightly. He pulled the envelope from his pocket and set it on the table. "I wrote this for you. Not to ask for anything. To tell the truth." She glanced at the envelope, then back at him. "You can say it here. The rain's long, and I don't like reading letters in its noise." He nodded, silent for a moment, then spoke. "I came not out of longing, but gratitude." "Gratitude?" "Yes, because you left. If you'd stayed, I'd still be that arrogant blind man thinking I was always right." "You've changed a lot," Emma said, "but are you sure it's real?" He smiled, eyes wet. "I'm not sure. I know I no longer need to prove anything. I want to live honestly." Silence filled the room. The rain tapped gently against the windows. Emma's gaze softened. "Have you eaten?" He shook his head. "Sit down," she said, rising toward the kitchen. "I still have some soup." He sat, watching her through the doorway. She was making chicken and herb soup, the same kind she used to make. The scent filled the room, stirring old memories. That last dinner, candlelight, and goodbye. Everything was the same except now there was no anger. She brought out 2 bowls and placed them on the table. "Eat. After all, you came a long way to get back here." He smiled faintly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. It's just dinner." They ate in silence. Outside, rain fell softly under the porch light. Daniel looked at her, his heart full not with passion, but with quiet gratitude. When they finished, she gathered the dishes. He asked quietly, "Emma, can you forgive me?" She turned, eyes calm. "Forgive you?" "Daniel, I forgave you long ago." He blinked. "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because forgiveness isn't for the one who hurt you. It's for your own peace." Daniel bowed his head, his lips trembling. Emma walked closer, her voice gentle. "You can stay tonight. On the sofa. It's too wet to drive." He looked up, eyes glistening, and nodded. "Thank you, Emma." "Don't thank me." She smiled softly. "I don't want anyone else waiting in the rain again." That night, Daniel lay on the sofa, listening to the rhythm of the rain. Each drop on the roof sounded like a heartbeat from the past. In the dark, he whispered, "Thank you for opening the door." In her room, Emma lay awake, eyes wet not from pain, but from the strange lightness in her heart. By morning, sunlight filled the house. Golden light spilled through the curtains, brushing pale warmth across the walls. The scent of coffee and baked bread filled the air. Daniel woke to find Emma in the kitchen, wearing a grey sweater and hair in a bun. Her face was calm and clear. "Good morning," he said. She turned, smiling. "Morning. Beautiful day. It's been a while since Seattle had sunshine." He looked out the window at the sparkle of sunlight on the wet street. "Do you always wake up this early?" "Yes. When you live alone, you learn to love mornings. They remind you that there's always another day to begin." He said nothing. She set 2 cups of coffee on the table and sat across from him. "What will you do now?" He looked into his cup, then answered slowly, "I've been at the garage for a year." It suits you. It's real. He smiled. It is. I used to think success meant being admired. Now, peace feels like success enough. Emma nodded. I'm glad you found yourself again. They sat quietly for a long while. Outside, birds sang. Light filtered through the windows, softening their faces, faces that had known pain and grace. Daniel said softly, Emma, if I told you I still love you, what would you do? She didn't look at him. I wouldn't believe it. Love isn't words. It's how you live. He smiled, faint but discernible. Then I won't repeat it. If you ever look back someday, I'll live in a way that proves it. She looked up, her eyes gentler now. Are you staying in Seattle? I think so. I want to start again, right where it ended. She nodded. Good. Seattle's a city for people who know how to rise again. Her words made him laugh, a quiet, genuine laugh he hadn't heard from himself in years. That afternoon, he helped her fix the porch roof. They worked silently. The breeze carried the scent of lavender and damp wood. She stood below, he on the ladder, sunlight soft on both faces. Be careful, she said. I remember. You won't have to save me again. She laughed a pure, bright laugh, light as morning rain. In that sound, every trace of sorrow seemed to dissolve. When evening came, Daniel got ready to leave. At the door, he turned back. Thank you for letting me stay. Don't say that, she replied. Sometimes, people return not to ask forgiveness, but to show they've truly changed. He nodded. I'll be back, not to ask for another chance, but to bring back the man I've become. She looked at him, eyes shining softly. Then you'd better go. The rain will be back soon. He smiled, opened the door, and stepped out. Outside, the wind rose, and light rain began to fall. Daniel turned once more. Emma stood in the doorway, warm light glowing behind her. He said quietly, See you after the rain, Emma. She answered, voice soft as breath. And next time, I hope you won't be wet. The door closed. Seattle's rain kept falling, but it wasn't sad this time, because some returns aren't meant to rebuild what was broken, but to begin again with faith. Morning light in Seattle always carried a strange gentleness. Not bright, not dim, just a thin veil that covered everything, soft enough to hide old wounds, but never strong enough to make you forget they once existed. Daniel woke earlier than Emma. He was used to rising at dawn, brewing coffee, reading the paper, then stepping out to the backyard to sit beneath the lavender trellis she had once planted with her hands. The scent was the same, he only knew how to appreciate it now. The house was so quiet that one could hear the ticking clock and the steady patter of rain on the roof. When Emma came downstairs, the coffee was already poured. No greetings, no thanks, just a glance, a nod, and a silent rhythm that had slowly become a way of being. Those days drifted by like a river without ripples. They shared breakfast, then went their separate ways. Emma still worked at the architecture firm. Daniel worked at the garage. In the evenings, when he came home early, he cooked. Not to earn her favor, simply because he wanted to do something honest with his hands, something small that mattered. Sometimes they watched the news together, neither speaking, only the sound of rain on the porch, cups clinking softly against the wooden table, and the TV light flickering against the wall as if washing away old memories. One night, Emma returned late. Daniel was sitting at the table, fixing the old wall clock. She stepped inside, took off her raincoat, set her bag down, and watched him for a while before asking, You still remember how to fix those things? Yeah. You used to say you liked the sound of the ticking. I believed time could go back if we were patient enough. He looked up at her. And now? She hesitated, then said quietly, Now I know time doesn't turn back. But people can do it if they genuinely want to. For the first time in months, Daniel smiled a genuine smile, neither bitter nor forced. Thank you for letting me stay, Emma replied softly. Staying isn't a reward. It's an opportunity. Whether you use it well, that's up to you. She turned and went to her room. Daniel sat there, listening to the newly fixed clock tick steady, warm like the heartbeat of a house learning to live again. Day after day, they relearned how to coexist without touching old wounds. Daniel watered the plants, fixed the leaky faucet, and tightened loose hinges. Emma sometimes let him drive her to work, though she kept a quiet distance close enough not to be strangers, far enough not to be familiar. Once, while cleaning the storage room, Emma found an old wooden box, their wedding photos, handwritten letters, and relics of a life they once shared. She hesitated, about to throw it out, but Daniel said, "Keep it, not to remember but to remind ourselves that we once lived something real." She said nothing, just set the box back on the shelf and brushed off the dust. Dust sparkled in the sunlight, like fragments of forgiven memories. By June, Seattle had longer days. The lavender outside bloomed fully, painting the porch in soft purple. The fragrance drifted all the way into the living room. One weekend morning, Emma brought 2 cups of tea outside. Daniel was reading in the sun, his face lean and tired, but gentle. "Here, ginger and honey tea," she said. He took it, nodding. "Thank you. You've stopped saying thank you so much lately." He laughed. "You told me not to talk too much. Now you're blaming me for being quiet." She smiled faintly, didn't argue. They sat there, listening to the wind through the trees, birds, breeze, and faraway traffic weaving into a wordless song. Daniel asked softly, "Did you ever think we'd sit like this again?" "I did, but I thought, when it happened, we'd be different people." He looked at her, then away. "Maybe you're right." That afternoon, they went grocery shopping. Something so simple yet for them, it was a quiet test, because even in small gestures, the past waited, ready to be mentioned. When Emma picked up a loaf of bread, Daniel said, "You still buy this kind?" "Yeah. You remember?" "How could I forget? I used to get mad at you for choosing it, said it was too soft." "Yeah." She smiled. "And now? Now I think I was wrong. Soft is good. Too hard, and things break." Emma looked at him for a long moment. She didn't speak, but in her eyes, something just a little began to thaw. That night, while Daniel washed the dishes, Emma turned on the radio. A familiar melody filled the room, the same song they had danced to on her birthday years ago. She didn't turn it off. Daniel paused, wiped his hands, and stepped out. They looked at each other. Neither spoke. Then, as if guided by memory, he reached out his hand. Emma stared at it, strong, steady, trembling slightly. She hesitated a moment, then placed her hand in his. They began to move, slowly, quietly. Not the dance of passion, but the gentle steps of 2 people who had once been shattered, now daring to walk again on the fragile bridge between past and present. When the song ended, they stopped. Daniel said softly, "I don't dare ask for another chance. I want to live beside you, even like this, peacefully, without words." Emma looked up, her eyes damp but calm. "Maybe peace is the one thing we have never had until now." They stood there, no embrace, no kiss. Only the dim light between them, and the scent of lavender drifting in from the porch like a silent blessing from time itself. Seattle woke to a night washed clean by rain. The air was astonishingly clear, as if the whole city had been rinsed, the streets, the rooftops, even the old memories that lingered between them. Morning light caught on the droplets clinging to the leaves, turning them into tiny mirrors reflecting the sky. Daniel Moore sat on the porch, a cup of hot coffee in hand, steam curling into the crisp air. He still rose early, but this morning felt different. Not because of the weather, but because of what he felt inside, something light, quiet, like his heart had finally found its place again. From inside the house, Emma stepped out. She wore a soft sweater, her hair loose, her smile faint. "You're up early," she said, voice gentle. "Couldn't sleep. Sun's rare here, I wanted to see it." "Seattle has beautiful mornings," she said, settling beside him. "But only those who've endured its rain can really see them." He looked at her, warmth in his eyes. "That sounds philosophical." "Maybe," she smiled. "But it's true. I used to think rain was the worst thing. Now I know. Without it, this city would have no soul." Daniel nodded, gaze distant. "Just like me. Without my mistakes, I'd never have learned how to live honestly." Emma didn't answer. She didn't need to. They sat silently, listening to the soft wind through the lavender vines. That morning, Emma asked him to accompany her to the East Bridge, building the project she had spent years finishing. He blinked. "You want me to come?" "Yes. It's part of our story too. She said it, and he followed. The building shimmered under the sunglass panels reflecting the blue sky and the passing lives below. Everything was calm, elegant, deliberate inside, much like Emma herself. She led him through the floors, pointing out details. I designed this room in mist tones. It calms people, even when there's a storm outside. He smiled. You've always known how to turn places into feelings. And you? What have you learned from all this? Daniel paused, thinking, no house ever feels peaceful if its people live in lies. Emma turned to him. And now? No more lies? None. Now I live slowly and true. She nodded softly. Good. That's enough. They stood by the tall glass windows, looking out over Seattle. The city stretched beneath them, bright and wet in the summer light. Neither spoke, but something wordless passed between them. In the silence, maybe forgiveness. Or peace. That evening, the rain returned as it always did. But this time, Daniel didn't run for cover. He and Emma sat in the living room, the soft, glowing, and quiet music playing. The room was so calm that, from outside, one might think they'd lived together all their lives without breaks, without storms. On the table, Emma placed a small wooden box. He recognized it instantly, their old box of keepsakes. What are you going to do with it? He asked quietly. Open it, she said. Not to rekindle anything, to end it properly. She lifted the lid. Inside were the wedding photo, a few letters, and 2 rings. Hers was still bright, carefully kept. His had dulled, scratched with time. Emma looked at them for a long moment. I almost threw them away once, but something in me said to wait. Maybe one day, we'd need to look again to see how far we've come. She picked up his ring and held it out. Still got your hand? Daniel blinked. You mean, not to marry again? She smiled faintly. To remind you that some things can be mended with honesty, even when broken. He held out his hand. She slid the ring onto his finger. It felt cold, then slowly warm. Daniel said nothing. He only looked at her, gratitude flooding his eyes. Emma didn't meet his gaze. She just whispered, forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's when you can look at the past without feeling pain. A tear fell onto his hand. Neither knew whose it was. Outside, the rain stopped. The breeze carried the scent of lavender into the room, soft and clean. Daniel stepped to the door, looking at the clearing sky. Clouds thinned, revealing a pale moon. He turned back. Emma stood framed in the doorway, light spilling behind her like a quiet halo. He asked softly, Are you happy, Emma? She replied, her voice almost a breath, I am, because I finally got to meet the real you again. He took a step closer. And can you trust me again? She smiled. I already do. Whether I still love you, let tomorrow answer that. Daniel nodded. No more words were needed, because sometimes happiness doesn't come from promises, but from the small light cast on what once seemed lost. He held out his hand. She placed hers in it. Their fingers closed steady, sure, unafraid. Outside, Seattle glowed after the rain. Light danced across rooftops, rippled over the water, gleamed on the city's glass, and on the 2 rings newly worn again. There was no grand finale, only a story ending quietly but completely.